Okay, today we're going to talk about something that Sid really likes to talk about. 14. That seems like a lot.
It's just because, like, he says that defense and, like, terminal defense are different for each.
Yeah, it's just like the whole idea is there's a lot of ways to do it, but there's a really easy way to memorize them. It's like a whole hit it again moment.
Okay.
Oh wait,
Sid,
I forgot
give
this.
this.
Okay,
So do you want to give this presentation?
I'll give like
you
the
like
first
this
part.
TED more than I do.
I'll give the first part, and then Rajiv can give the rest because he did
Okay.
those excellent drawings. So like we have the whole link chain, uniqueness link, internal link, impact, and then you have all these ways to respond to it. It's a lot, but we can there's a really easy way to remember it. Also, I would recommend if you haven't taken notes, take notes today because it's a lot of information and it's a lot easier if you have notes to memorize these. So yeah.
We can also share the presentation with them.
Yeah.
Also, wait, before we get started in how to respond to each of these levels, can someone refresh our memory on what they are? So if you want, you can just pick uniqueness, link, internal link, impact, and volunteer to say what that means.
I volunteer, Anthony. Okay, he's not here.
Yeah. Come on, someone explain one of them.
I'll do impact.
Okay.
Impact is basically the consequence of the plan.
Yeah, okay, sure. It's like the final step, why, and it's something that you care about. That's what an impact is.
Link connects the resolution to a certain thing that'll lead to the impact.
Yeah. Good.
Two more guys, come on.
Uniqueness is why it only happens in your world, not the other.
Good. That concerns normally what the status quo is up to.
Did someone say impact already?
Yeah. The one that's left is internal link.
Oof. It's like linking a link to your impact or to another link.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay. Now that we had a refresher, these are kind of the way that those arguments can be phrased around. Like the chance of something happening is low. It won't happen. It'll happen because of something else. The opposite will happen, or it'll actually be good if that happened. And sure, there are more abstractions that you could pull apart. But generally, all of these are different responses that mean different things for the round.
Yeah. And I feel like all of these arguments could arise naturally if, just someone were saying to you, this bad thing would happen or this good thing would happen if you did the resolution. But I think that to understand them and formalize them is not something that, is actually going to, in round, you're going to be oh man, I should read some internal link defense. It'll just help you understand these arguments better and understand, I think be better at generating them if you understand all the different categories. So this is not meant, as something that, this is something you need to know just in a round. Don't think that, especially you don't need to respond to all 14 ways. It's just a tool to sort of guide the way in which you approach a debate. So yeah, these five. Anyone have any questions so far? Because this might be a confusing.
For bonus points, if someone could tell us which two of these are offensive responses. If you don't, that's okay.
That'd be pretty impressive.
That'd be very cool. Very impressive.
The last one, it would actually be good if that happened because that's a turn.
There's one more.
The opposite of that will happen.
Yep.
Yeah, let's go policy kids.
Epic. We did teach you something.
Believe it or not. Anthony is raising his hand. You're allowed to just talk, Anthony. So you won't. Okay. Welcome to the screen you're going to be looking at some variation of for the next hour.
Why am I
It's a
being
guy
pushed off into a
pushed into
fiery pit?
Yes, it's specifically
This
you.
isn't you. This
It
is
says
some other
Dan,
guy.
though. It says
No,
Dan.
this is you.
It's
See,
it's some
exactly. It's
other
Dan. I
Dan.
knew it. No, it's me.
All right. So anyway, yeah, disadd is a helpful tool in understanding how, arguments against disadvantages to the affirmative. I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to understand how to respond to arguments because the disadvantages are really straightforward. They always just say that the status quo is good. Like right now, Dan, he's living his best life. He's doing pretty good. He's not going to die or anything. Then the AF pushes him off the cliff into a pit of fire, which causes him to die.
I'd rather not do that.
And that would be bad. So if you guys, the first part of this is probably identifying all the different arguments that make up the disadvantage itself. So there's uniqueness, the link, the internal link, and the impact. So who thinks they can identify uniqueness on the chart?
Dan is currently falling off he's in the middle of falling off and then hitting the fire. Is that it?
But he's not.
I think you're thinking of a non-unique argument.
I was thinking of non-unique.
With just talking about uniqueness. This is a bit hard, but to conceptualize on this. But yeah.
The AF has to push that Dan. The AF is pushing Dan, which is why it's unique, because if the AF doesn't push Dan, then Dan doesn't go in the fire.
Yeah, so the second part of that is what uniqueness is. So Jackson, if you want to click there's animations on the slide, I think.
Oh.
So yeah, that's
Does someone else want to
uniqueness.
give the presentation? Do you want to give the presentation, Rasheed? Because you've made the animations.
There's only animations on this slide. And also Sid made the animations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's uniqueness.
Uniqueness is that he's on. Oh, you can go.
No, go ahead.
The uniqueness of the scenario is that he's starting off not falling into the fire. He's starting off by just standing there. He's safe. He's on the ledge.
Yeah. And then someone want to attempt to classify the link or identify it?
The F pushing him off.
Yep. It creates a change from the status quo that starts the scenario. So if you want to, the push is the link. What about the internal link?
Is that him falling down off the cliff?
If he falls off the cliff, he'll fall into the fire.
Maybe we should have a slide.
yeah, maybe. I like what we've done with it though. So yeah, if you want to reveal the internal link.
Yeah.
And then the impact.
Anyone want to take a guess?
Yeah. Dan gets to live happily ever after.
That's good.
Why isn't the impact thing showing up? Oh,
I don't know. Well, yeah, Dan falls into the fire. And
Dan's a firebender, so he's all right.
Yeah. Maybe. We'll see in the later slides.
Immune to fire.
You're a firebender, Dan?
You seen Zuko's eye?
Yeah.
He's not immune to fire because he's a firebender.
Yeah.
Dan is dead.
Just no, he's not. I'm not dead.
You make some good points.
I'm still here.
Look, this is someone else. This is disadd Dan. Not.
No, this is me.
No, you're advantage Dan. This is disadd.
Oh, okay.
Also, you can use these responses for an advantage also. We just call it disadvantage.
Does Dan also die?
Alliteration.
Yeah. Just like uniqueness will be in the opposite direction if you're using them against an advantage, because with uniqueness for an advantage, you want the status quo to be bad and the AF to produce a good change. But yeah. So with uniqueness, that concerns the status quo, right? And what's happening in the status quo. So you can imagine that there are a few ways in which we can make arguments against where Dan is. Is he close to the cliff's ledge or is he off the ledge? In determining, does this argument matter? So yeah, look at the first example. Say Dan is pretty far from the cliff and we push him, not all the way off the cliff, just a little bit towards the cliff. Is Dan going to fall off? No, he's not going to fall off. So that argument, it's that the uniqueness
Jackson,
is so
click.
Yeah, Yeah.
This is why I said I shouldn't give the presentation because I didn't freaking.
This is the
make
last
it.
animation, I swear. So yeah.
Rajiv said there were only animations on the last slide.
So uniqueness, remember, is about the status quo being good or sustainable. But if the status quo is so good or sustainable that it's already locked in, and that the affirmative can only change it in some small way, like Dan is 10 feet away from the cliff, but the AF can only push him 5, then it makes it difficult to prove that any bad thing will result because of the affirmative if uniqueness is really strong. Now, on the other hand, suppose that Dan was already falling off the cliff and, we pushed him while he was like going to fall anyway. Does us pushing him change anything about his like eventual outcome?
His suffering lasts less time because he falls faster.
He won't fall faster unless you like push him downwards. We're just pushing him.
Oh, we're just pushing. Okay.
Yeah.
You'll push him
Well,
away
he
from the
gets like
fire.
1 more second of life before he starts burning.
Give life.
No, that's not how physics works.
Yeah, no. If you fire a bullet and drop a ball, they'll hit the ground at the same time. Anyway, so yeah, this is called non-uniqueness. So it's sort of the opposite of uniqueness overwhelms the link. So obviously don't go for both of these arguments. But basically if Dan's already falling, it doesn't matter if we push him because he's going to be in the fire anyway. So the scenario of the disadvantage is going to happen regardless of if we do the affirmative or not. Therefore, it doesn't really matter. The disadvantage doesn't matter because, it's inevitable or like it's already happening or whatever. So yeah, if the status quo is bad, it doesn't matter if the plan makes it worse because it's probably not unique.
And this is where bright lines come into importance of like what's defined as like what's the hard point, like what's the distance. Does anybody remember what bright lines are?
Is it kind of like the turning point, sort of like the point where you
That's a good way to
never
put it.
Yeah, it's like basically having hard numbers. So like if climate change needs like a 3% reduce in like greenhouse gases and the AF only reduces it by like 2.5%, then it's not enough. So yeah, that's just an advantage, but yeah.
I would say it's
a bright line.
Go ahead.
Okay, a bright line is just defining where the edge of the cliff is, right?
Yeah.
So you essentially imagine instead of moving Dan forward or backward, you're moving the cliff edge forward and backward, and you're trying to argue where the cliff is and whether or not Dan's already over it, how far away from that he is, whether or not the push will be enough to get him over the cliff, that sort of stuff.
In a very technical sense, a bright line is a threshold for the magnitude of an internal link in order to achieve sort of the next chain in the link chain. So like Sid said, if we need to solve climate change, we need to reduce emissions by X%, then that would sort of be the bright line for that particular internal link. But yeah, okay, cool. So let's look at what that means in terms of disadd Dan. So yeah, if Dan is far enough from the cliff's edge, then he'll never be in danger, even if he gets pushed. And so that would be uniqueness overwhelming the link. And then if we go to the next slide, the non-uniqueness argument would say that Dan is already falling off the cliff, so it doesn't matter if he's pushed, because he's gonna be dead either way. So it's not the AF's fault that he's gonna be in the fire. He was gonna be in the fire either way. Okay, so yeah, now if we look at every other part of the link chain, which basically, we talk about links, internal links, and impacts as sort of, the starting point, the middle points, and the end point, but they really all share some similarities, so we can apply similar responses to them. So the first is just like no X, so that could be like no link, no internal link, or no impact. And so that's like terminal defense, which, if anyone wants to refresh us on what terminal defense is as opposed to mitigatory defense. It's from a while ago, but
terminal just makes the impact irrelevant. Mitigatory just kind of makes it less probable or less
So
bad.
yeah, terminal reduces the risk to 0. Mitigatory keeps some, non-zero risk. So yeah, if I say no link, that means I just don't think there's any link at all. Like there's zero chance of a link, or like there is some structural reason that a link is impossible. Then there is sort of a watered down version of that, which is mitigatory, which is just X defense. So internal link defense, I could say the internal link is improbable. Then there is a question of the uniqueness of each internal link or link or whatever. So like an example would be if and we'll look at this with disadd Dan, but if like that particular part of the link chain is already going to happen in the status quo, then that part of the link chain is not unique, and thus the disadd as a whole is not unique either. And then finally, there is a turn, which you can use again at any level. But a turn just basically as we said, it's an offensive response to an argument. It takes a reason to vote for them, and it turns it into a reason to vote for you. But oftentimes turns have to involve some other aspect, like most of the time, all of the other three, if not at least 2 out of 3, to make sure that they actually provide you with the value that you need. So this I think will be clearest when we get to impact turns. But if you want, let's do this fun lesson and let's look at disadd Dan in all his glory with the next 12 different scenarios here. So again, we're trying to show that the AF isn't making Dan's life worse, right? Or maybe it's making Dan's life better. But anyway, so let's start with no link. So if Dan is, not being pushed by the affirmative, just not at all, he might say, thanks for not pushing me, because he's not being pushed. And so there's no reason to think that the AF would cause him to fall off the cliff because they're not pushing him. So that's equivalent to what no link might be. Link defense might say that the link is somewhat weak. So the AF hasn't been hit in the gym, so he's not able to push Dan hard enough. And so Dan, in response to that weak push by the AF, just kind of roasts him and was like, you trying to kill me? Try harder next time. And so
Also, no link is sometimes called D-link by people. They use
Don't call it that, please.
Yeah, but that's what most of the PF people call it. So if they say D-link, then you know what they're saying.
Yeah, that is helpful. But yeah, in either of these scenarios, right, it would be probably making us care less about what the AF does to Dan, because either they're doing nothing or they're barely affecting him. So if we hopefully everyone's good with that. If we can move on to the next slide.
And let us know if we're moving too fast or too slow.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, when there's a special term which was created by Will Repko for when there's no link uniqueness for a disadvantage, which is called a thumper. And it's not related to the character from Bambi. It just thumps the disadd, quote unquote, because it causes the link scenario to happen regardless, independently of whether the affirmative causes it to happen. So here the link scenario is Dan being pushed off the cliff. So suppose that, Dan is talking to the AF and he's like, AF, I'm already being pushed off the cliff by Appa for some reason, probably because I tried to hurt Aang or something. And so it doesn't matter if the AF tries to push me off as well, because I'm going to fall off anyway, right? So if the link scenario is about, I don't know, the link scenario is about politics, and it's about Trump becoming unpopular, then a thumper to that might be most actions Trump has taken in office which have made him less popular. So yeah, anyway, it's some other thing that should trigger the link. So if Appa, a 10-ton bison, is going to push Dan off the cliff, it probably doesn't matter if the AF, who's a human, is also pushing him off the cliff, because he's going to fall off the cliff anyway. In this case, because he's being pushed by something else, and that's sort of the relationship with the thumper. And that's a term, again, you might hear within debate.
Thumpers can also sometimes... Oh yeah, go.
if like the one scenario where like the cliff is farther away, and so if you say like there's like two, if you include a thumper and you also say the cliff is far away, wouldn't that like turn against you? Because you're saying like even if the thumper like pushes Disad Dan off, he won't fall into the impact.
Well, no, because as long as you win that, like, so the the uniqueness overwhelms the link argument would say Dan is too far away from the cliff to fall off in any case, right? But this argument would say if Dan is close enough to the cliff to fall off, then he's going to fall off anyway.
Okay, all right. So it's already saying that.
Yeah, it's saying Dan being pushed is locked in. Whether uniqueness is bigger than the push or the link is a separate question. But that's, yeah. So like Dan being pushed is locked in. But if uniqueness is bigger than him being pushed, then like, you know, that the disad would go away separately.
You can also sometimes use the term thumper to apply to like historical examples. It's like, oh, he's been pushed in the past, and maybe you might say, nothing happened, and this proves that the cliff is really long. So maybe someone's arguing that like, oh, passing the AF will cause an economic recession, and this will cause resource wars, right? You could be like, did we have resource wars during like the 80s and 90s like oil crisis? No, because we had a recession. Did we have resource wars in 2008? No. Are we having resource wars right now because of the COVID recession? No. So you can say, oh, all of these examples thump the link by showing that like it should have already been triggered sometime in the past. And this proves that like the cliff is like really long and Dan is really far away from it. So if this couldn't do it, then the AF isn't going to do it.
Also in LD, don't say thump because nobody will understand what you're saying. Explain what a thumper is.
Unless you're like, we're thumping them right now on the flow.
Unless you're in front of D Pasquale.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right, and so this is a link turn. So you'll notice that a link turn, and again, any turn requires also establishing like another. You need to establish like either that part of the disad or the disad as a whole is non-unique, and you need to establish the actual defense and turn. So in this case, it like probably doesn't like remember a turn is when we take something which was supposed to be a reason to vote for the negative, in this case, like a disadvantage is a reason to vote for the negative, and we respond to it in a way that makes it a reason to vote for the affirmative. So if we're turning the link, which is about the push, right, the only thing that we need to establish is like theoretically the direction of the push. So if we push Dan away from the cliff, that's probably better than pushing him towards the cliff. So to win that, we might need to prove that there's no link in that we don't push Dan towards the cliff, that there is a link turn, and that we actually push Dan like back towards land, you know, back towards the cliffs, you know, like back towards the mainland and away from the cliff's edge. But none of that really matters or is an offensive reason to vote for us if Dan isn't going to fall right now. Which I think proves that, or like is an important thing to remember, is that for an argument, when the affirmative says we make something better, for that to be a reason to vote for the affirmative, you have to like, what's happening now has to be bad. And for the negative to say they make something worse, for that to be a reason to vote for the negative, that thing has to be good right now, or like stable or sustainable or whatever. So basically, you know, in this case, for the link turn to have offense, you also need to read a non-uniqueness argument and presumably some sort of no link argument. But to understand a link turn, right, just imagine the direction of the push being changed. So Dan is going to fall, but, you know, the AF doesn't actually push him off the cliff. The AF saves him from falling off the cliff by, you know, coming in on Appa and sending like an air blast at him so that he doesn't fall. But hopefully that makes sense. That's the link level. And again, hopefully you're taking notes. If you have any questions, because this stuff is important, like we can field them now, and also at points in the future.
You'll learn the terminology over time. Like if you don't know exactly what like an internal link defense argument is, and you can't identify it around, that's not terrible. But as long as you know that these are the type of like argumentative choices that you have, like some instinctual understanding of them, that's what's really important. We're trying to get across right now.
I also think the biggest thing to be able to identify is our returns, not just for using them, but when they're used against you. because those you have to answer. Otherwise, that's just answering offense. So
Don't
learning
drop
how to,
offense.
yeah. So just being able to recognize those is really important.
Like honestly, in like your novice year, if you don't drop offense and if you weigh in every debate, you'll win like most of your debates.
Yeah, that's very true.
But yeah, okay, cool. So the internal link level, it looks similar. One, like the internal link here is again Dan falling into the fire. But you could say that there would be no internal link. It would be terminal defense against the internal link if Dan could fly, because then like falling, that's what mere mortals do. Gravity, I laugh at gravity all the time. Haha, gravity.
Yes, that is what I do.
Yeah.
I am this Dan.
Yeah. So anyway, that would be one way to prove that Dan wouldn't fall, right? And that would just take out any risk of the disad, because who cares if the AF pushes him off the cliff? It'll just give Dan a nice head start on his his flight around the world. So we can move on to the next slide. So internal link defense might be, if we were to say, it would be less likely that Dan would fall into the fire after you push him, because like say that's the trajectory of that Dan would take in most instances, and that target area is like all the possible places where he could fall. That would mean in most cases the internal link wouldn't cause the impact, or at the very least that it is improbable that the internal link would cause the impact. So that would be an example of internal link defense. Obviously, it doesn't, reduce the risk of the disad to 0, but it tends to mitigate it because it says it's unlikely that he would actually land in the fire.
Generally, with disad Dan, we make the assumption when we're doing the analogy that he doesn't get killed by the fall, the fire kills him.
Yeah.
Because then the situation makes the internal link defense makes more sense.
Yeah. Don't worry about physics, that's not the point. So no internal link uniqueness. And remember, so uniqueness would say that in the status quo, the internal link will not be triggered. But suppose that, Dan is standing on the cliff, but there's a hole in the cliff where he's standing. So in the status quo, he's going to fall anyway. So him falling into the fire is inevitable, whether he falls through the hole in the ground or whether he's pushed by the affirmative, into the fire over there. So that would, again, be a reason that the disad wouldn't matter, since Dan falling into the fire is inevitable. So it doesn't matter if the affirmative causes him to fall into the fire, because he would fall into the fire anyway. And so, yeah, this would also be a necessary component of an internal link turn, which we can look at next. Just like for how a link turn to be offense, you need to prove that the disad or the link is non-unique. There needs to be some level of non-uniqueness if you're going for an internal link turn. Because, if you say that the plan pushes Dan off the cliff, right? But that actually saves him from going into the fire. So that would mean that the internal link actually, moves him away from the fire. He when you push him, it causes him to fall in the opposite direction of the fire. But for that to matter, he has to be falling into the fire right now. Because if Dan is on the far left side of the screen, and we push him a little more to the left, right? It's not like that's going to actually affect whether or not he falls, it's into the fire, because he's not going to fall into the fire in either case. But if, you want your internal link turn to have offense, you need to prove that there is some degree of non-uniqueness, in that Dan is in danger of falling into the fire in the status quo, because of, remember, the hole in the ground, that was the internal link thumper, or the no internal link uniqueness, so if you prove that the internal link actually saves Dan from the fire rather than causes him to fall into the fire, that's the necessary parts of an internal link turn, which hopefully makes sense.
Rajiv, do you want to take a 2-minute break right now, just because it's a lot of information?
We might be oversaturating. I think that's
fair. This is definitely a lot. So taking breaks, and then you can just pause the recording now.
Yeah, for sure.
I almost.
Wait, isn't a no impact just that there's no fire there?
Yeah, I don't know. I was worried about the fall. People would say stuff about the fall. So I'm like, what if someone was literally just invulnerable? So yeah. Anyway, so Deadpool can probably survive a fire because he would just like regenerate like any flesh that he lost, I guess. So
That's
yeah,
what happened in the movie, right? He was in the
Yeah.
fire, but he was fine.
yeah. So yeah, there would be no impact in that case because we wouldn't care if he was in the fire or not because it wouldn't cause any adverse health outcomes. So yeah, that would just be a reason that we wouldn't care. There would be no impact at all, right? It reduces the risk of the impact to 0. So that's why it's no impact instead of impact defense. Yeah, any questions? I mean, we can move on, but I feel like
Probably give an example of that in round.
yeah. Okay, that's maybe good. So say that I don't know. Say that
Go like nuke war mad.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's more of an example of impact defense, but sure. So, I mean, if they read a nuclear war impact to a disadvantage, you can just say that mutually assured destruction, which is that when one person launches a nuke, like at one country, that country would retaliate with a nuclear strike at the first country, causing the destruction of both countries, which neither country wants. So mutually assured destruction would prevent anyone from launching a nuke, which means that your impact isn't going to happen. So that would be one example of impact defense. And, if phrased correctly, might also be a terminal defense against impact.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. So now suppose that Dan was jumping off or was falling off the cliff and he was going to land on a bouncy house. Then, maybe he'd be okay. But like maybe he'd also like die. I don't know. It's there's a link. If you don't have audio set up, it's fine. But it's a link to a YouTube video.
How do I set up audio?
I don't know. I think when you click like share screen, you have to say include. I don't know, Sid. What do you?
Wait,
do?
is this the full scene?
No, it's just 30 seconds.
Okay. Because I didn't know if we technically be allowed to show.
Doing,
You guys
totally
this?
doing. Rock and roll. That's right. I'm not thinking. Yes. Yeah. Mecca is awesome. Woo. Jumping off the roof. Woo. Bouncing on a fountain. Woo. Show 'em who's boss. Woo. Rip a hole in the
5 seasons in the past 2
I'm ready
days.
to do this. I'm ready to make a point. Hey, guys, listen up.
Yeah. Fair use is defined under the Copyright Act of 1999. Yes. But yeah.
For educational
YouTube,
purposes,
please don't
you're allowed to
demonetize this
do-
video. That's gonna get
Yeah.
0 views.
Yeah.
Because it's for educational purposes, we don't have to worry about copyright.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, so yeah, there's a bouncy house, so he'll probably be okay, right? Yeah, like probably. Don't think, just do it. But yeah, that would be okay. Yeah, this is a good example of no impact uniqueness. So if the impact is like, Dan getting burned alive, if Dan is going to get burned at the stake tomorrow anyways, there's probably little distinction between him falling into the fire now or him getting burnt at the stake tomorrow. So the impact is not unique. So it doesn't really matter. So an example of that in a round might be if a team says that the affirmative causes an economic decline. An argument that shows no impact uniqueness might say that a catastrophic decline in the economy is structurally inevitable because of resource constraints, for example. So that would prove that economic decline is inevitable, so it's sort of useless to try to prevent it, and we should try to do something else. So if Dan's go ahead.
Or they could be bad debaters and just say that an economic decline is inevitable because of the business cycle, and then that's their entire response, and then leave it at that.
Yeah, that is also possible.
How is that different than like he's gonna fall anyway?
It's different because it applies at a different level. So when we say all of the no uniqueness arguments, like they result, I would say, in the same type of thing. But so no impact uniqueness means that the impact, Dan being burnt, is inevitable. No internal link uniqueness means the internal link, Dan falling, is the part that we're proving is inevitable or already happening. No,
Okay.
no
Alright.
link uniqueness means that him being pushed is inevitable. And no
Okay.
uniqueness, for the entire disad is just the entire scenario of the disad is inevitable.
Yeah, just determine where on the link chain it ends up
Yeah.
varying.
Yeah. And okay, so this is an impact turn. So I was always taught that an impact turn has 3 parts. So this might not be how it occurs in debates, but this is the best way to make sure that an impact turn has offense for you. And you'll see that why each part of this argument on its own is pretty powerful defensively. But if you combine all 3, then it's like surefire offense for you. With like cool defensive like escape measures like safety hatches and stuff. So suppose the impact turn level of this argument would be that pushing Deadpool into the fire is the only way to convince President Xi of China, to not launch a nuclear first strike in response to a skirmish in the South China Sea, because he just truly despises Deadpool and is demanding this, or he'll launch a nuke at like San Francisco. And so, like, yes, that would be probably a reason that pushing this individual into the fire would be good. But that doesn't, one, disprove the reason that pushing him into the fire would be bad. And 2, it doesn't say anything about whether, him being pushed into the fire or like the problems that the AF talks about are, are unique, or if they're inevitable. So I would say something that can help this argument and make it a lot stronger is if you also said this individual is going to be burnt at the stake tomorrow anyways, so the impact of him being on fire is inevitable. But if we push him into the fire now, then it'll cause Xi to not launch that nuclear weapon, whereas if we do it tomorrow, it won't. And then finally, you can also say that there's no impact to Deadpool being burned, because fire doesn't hurt him, because he'll just, again, regenerate. But pushing him into the fire would be sufficient for Xi to not launch the nuclear strike, so it's good. So you can see that through what you've done, you've reduced the risk of the affirmatives, or of the negatives impact, to 0. You've said that, in fact, there is another reason, a separate reason, that their impact is good. And you would say, even if the thing that they describe as bad is in fact bad, they're like, that bad thing is inevitable, whereas our good thing is unique. So you've really just deconstructed the impact and turned the disad into a huge offensive argument for you.
When you're at they say this is bad and we say this is good level, there are actually kind of like 2 sort of sub levels within the impact. One is saying that there are some added effects of the impact itself that are in fact good, and like more good than the effects the other team talks about are bad. Another level is just to say the effects of the impact that the other team talks about are in and of themselves good. So you gotta say it's something like nuclear war. If you wanted to be like, oh, nuclear war is actually good, because death is good, right?
Or because
if
it causes global cooling, which prevents climate change.
Yeah, if you're like, because death is good, they can still be like, yeah, well, all the bad, like pain and suffering still happens. So you have to outweigh death being good with that. But if instead you say, actually, all that pain and suffering in and of itself is good, then you're kind of like turning that like second sub level of being like, the effects of the impact are good, and not just the impact itself has other good consequences.
I'll give a classic example, which is economic decline. So what, the negative might say is, AF causes economic decline. That's bad because it causes a nuclear war between states. So if we look at the 3 parts of the impact turn that I've laid out here with regards to that argument, the first would be that causing an economic decline would actually be good because it would solve global warming. So that would be, again, like one part of it where we say the impact is actually good because it solves global warming. But if we only went with that part, then the neg would still have full access to nuclear war, and we would only have access potentially to global warming. So we would be giving them we would be conceding the full weight of their impact scenario, even if it looks like we're responding to it by reading our own. Then if you look at no impact uniqueness, the equivalent of, the economy being burnt at the stake inevitably would be an inevitable economic decline, which means that if decline is what causes nuclear war, that decline is inevitable, which means that, like that part of the impact should go away. But we can say that there is also no impact to economic decline because, even if the economy declines, mutually assured destruction still applies, so there won't be a war. So you can see now we have a unique impact to the disad, which proves that the affirmative is good with no defense on it, while they have a non-unique impact with defense on it. And so naturally, the one that is going to do better, unless there is defense and uniqueness and, extended arguments, is going to be the turn because it's stronger.
Also, what's something in LD which helps you do impact turns easier, more easily?
You had said
Framework.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, who said framework?
I.
Is that Silas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you just didn't come up. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. With like framework, you can just be like, if like I win framework, and under this framework, that impact is like actually good, or that impact is actually bad, and that's also like an easier way to do impact turns other than just like reading more cards on it.
Yeah. But reading more cards, I'm never going to tell you to not read more cards, especially in rebuttals.
She was like, if you're not reading at least one card in the 2AR, you're doing it wrong.
If there aren't at least 9 cards in the 1AR, like, I don't know, there is no scenario in which I would vote for it. Yeah.
Okay. Jackson, next slide.
Okay, so one thing that is just kind of an argumentative thing in all the beta events is this idea of a double turn. And the double turn is when you read a link turn and an impact turn at the same time. So let's piggyback off of the economic decline example that Rajiv gave. So one team argues, let's say the app argues, that we stop an economic decline from happening, right? Well, if you just read a link, let's say you're negative, and you read a link turn against that, you say, actually, you cause an economic decline. Great. That's offense for you. That's a reason that the affirmative is bad. Now, let's say, like, in a different round, you read an impact turn where you said that economic decline is actually good. Great. Now that's offense for you because the app is, like, preventing something that's good. Now, let's say you read a link turn and an impact turn. What that means in this scenario is that the affirmative causes an economic decline and that an economic decline is good, right? The negatives kind of cancel each other out, and the affirmative is just like, great, we get to keep our advantage, and we can just concede your arguments, and you just wasted a ton of time, and we essentially lost nothing because of it. So double turning is bad. Don't do it, because it'll just lead to a scenario where the affirmative is like, great, we cause a good thing, instead of causing a bad thing or not causing a good thing.
Jackson, can you go back to the link turn slide? Yeah, so like with this, you could see that, so if we say AF.
Yeah, I got it. So
yeah.
The AF, let's say we're pushing him to safety, right? But if we also say that the safety is bad and that he needs to go into the fire to stop like the nuclear war or something, like let's say the guy is Deadpool and he needs to like stop G from launching a nuclear war, then pushing him away from the fire is bad. We want him to go in the fire because the fire is good.
There's actually a graphic for this, if you would.
Oh, there is?
There is.
Where?
It's next. Oh, you have to click through. Yeah, I guess this is the. Yeah.
Also, edit what? No? Oh, is this it? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
This is it.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So
it didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, pushing him away. If right now he's going to fall into the fire, and that's going to convince Xi to not launch a nuclear first strike in response to the skirmish in the South China Sea, which would be good, right? And if you were to only say that, you would be like, oh, the app, or the app's a good idea. But if you also say, well, the app actually also pushes him back towards the cliff. If you hadn't read the first argument, that would be, again, good offense for you. But if you say both, that him going into the fire is good, and you stop him from going into the fire, then you've double turned yourself. And now the neg would just be like, okay, we agree. You've lost. Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Yep.
Questions?
And yeah, any questions on any of the slides? I think I'll make a PDF version of this and then download it and send it in the LD group chat, so you can all have access to this this presentation. I think is helpful. No questions? Okay. So again, in essentially every debate event, you'll just have blocks. So essentially blocks are just your hordes of evidence you keep in your Word documents and Google Drive folders that you are ready to pull out at any time. They should ideally be well organized and able to respond to multiple arguments. I can show you an example of some of the blocks I have for policy debate prepared for previous topics. But this is really good. So now if they reach some impact, you just like Control F in your blocks, you search for that impact, you find it, and then hopefully under there you've organized some defense separate from some offense as like reasons that's bad, that's not as bad as it is, or it's actually good, and you can like respond to a lot of things very easily. So being well organized is definitely a part of debate. Blocks are almost always cards.
Jackson was specifically talking about like big like back files of blocks. That's something I'm working on for LD right now. But also you have blocks for just generic arguments on the topic. So like on the nukes topic, we had a block for deterrence. So like these are like the generic arguments that the other side reads. These are prepared responses. So A, you're being very efficient, and B, that you have evidence for it, and it's not just all analytics, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. So analytics are can actually be really really good tool to use. It's essentially just making an argument without evidence. If you're just going to make some logical sounding argument, point out some flaw in your opponent's argumentation, maybe like, oh, your author isn't qualified, or actually there's been some new development in the news that even though I don't have a card, like it's true, and you probably know it's true, and this disproves your argument. So analytics are sometimes harder to flow and harder to respond to because you're not looking at a specific piece of evidence. So that's why they can be advantageous when you use them. So yeah, in your block files, if you want to just like make some logical arguments that you don't really need evidence to make, because like pretty much everyone can follow them and they don't require some like empirical data or like some scenario analysis. They're just like, yeah, this is like what happens. Like nuclear war causes like people to die. Like you probably want some evidence as to like why and how and like all the major effects of that. But if you just want to like make some like generic argument about like people lying or something, you can probably do that without evidence, and that's a lot of times where your analytics come in.
Yeah, I mean, also with analytics, I think that an important thing. Wait, what was I going to say? Maybe I forget. But yeah, oh yeah. So if you're responding to an argument that you don't have evidence against, like, or particularly an argument that you're hearing for the first time, you might have to rely on analytics. That's sort of why they're called analytics. You like analyze the opponent's argument. You try to find, flaws in it logically. So if you become good at sort of creating analytics on the spot, it can help you in debates when you're facing unfamiliar arguments. Because again, you might not have a card that disproves their link scenario, but you might just like listen to it and think like this is a logical flaw in it, which is what might occur if we were just having an informal debate, which neither of us prepared for. So yeah.
And then finally, just some strategic considerations about how to make arguments. You just want to make it as hard for your opponent as possible. Leave yourselves as many avenues to win as possible. Give them as few. Attack the multiple angles so that they have to be juggling multiple different arguments at the same time when they're crafting their responses. Don't double-turn yourself, and try to make it's in debate a lot of time. Well, LV is a bit iffy, but generally quality over quantity, because you're going to want to be able to explain these arguments to a judge. You want to be able to essentially take any argument you're making and make your entire final speech about it. If you feel that an argument is like inherently weak and you wouldn't want to spend like 3 minutes just explaining why there's one argument means you should like win the round, then you probably shouldn't be making that argument, as it's a waste of your time unless you're willing, there is a conceivable scenario in which you can go all in on it.
Remember
I guess.
Remember what we talked about yesterday with the vertical layers, having substantive debates over having very like blippy and like just trying to spread yourself too wide. Also, a thing that's like very simple and sounds common sense that a lot of people like, especially as a novice, you kind of just have to like realize is no matter what you say or no matter what the other person says, like no matter what you say, the other person is going to say you're wrong. So like you just want like no matter what, that's going to happen probably. So you just have to be prepared for that and like don't be like, oh no, they said I was wrong, because I feel like that's a mentality a lot of people get into. Like there's no 100% good argument.
Yeah. And,
yeah, people are going to disagree with you. That's kind of their job in debate.
And like, so choose arguments that do well when they stand up, that they stand up to scrutiny well, right? Because they are going to say bad things about your argument, regardless of how obscure it is. So choose arguments that are strong in the face of responses rather than arguments that are, weak, just like sort of inherently or, just tricky, I would say. There's a tendency to use tricks to novice debaters, which I don't. Not like
I have an example of a block file. This is way more than you guys are going to have in LD because your topics change very quickly.
Also policy. LD, like you have, like I think for me, for nukes, I probably had like 7 or 8 blocks on AF, but most of the times I only read 2 or 3 because you just wouldn't need them that much.
So this was like an AF regime I read last year. So let's say someone like made a response to it. Just like what happened?
The 1033 decide.
I'm just trying to show a different heading level.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So if I'm like, okay, they're going to read. This is not what I want. Sorry. They're going to read a disad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're going to, let's say they read something about deterrence, right? Give it a second. It's been a while since I've loaded up this file. Here are just like some cards I can read that show why deterrence is wrong. And I don't have to search for them. I don't really have to think about my arguments. Here they are. Maybe they read something specific about Russia or China. Here are like different cards I could read. Now this is a lot of work. Like this was like research accumulated from many camp files that I did not do across an entire year of policy debate. But especially in LD, just having like there are going to be like probably 3 or 4 main cases on each topic. So just having like 1 or 2 prepped out responses to each of them is probably not the worst idea. It'll save you a lot of time in rounds and like generally be helpful.
Yeah, I'll pull up the block list that I had for this. So yeah, so let me just make this small. So this is a lot more than I ever used. The only ones I ever used were deterrence, bioweapons, and non-unique. And probably util at some point, and morality, I think. But other than that, I used none of these other ones at all. I just had those from people that had done prep at camp, because it was the camp topic that I went to last year. But other than that, I only used these first couple ones minus asteroids and practice debates. So yeah, so like you see, you don't need a lot. And especially like the good thing is last year for LD, Jackson Rajiv would help with prep. And then otherwise it was mainly me and then Ian also helping sometimes with prep. But this year we have a lot of LDers, so we can have lots of prep.
Yeah, everyone loves to prep, am I right?
Yeah. So yeah, cool. Any questions on blocks, responding, anything like that? Cool. Okay, so I'm thinking let's do the topic presentation because that shouldn't take more than like 15 minutes.
Are you sure we can just do it tomorrow?
Oh, let's do it today because then we can talk about case writing tomorrow.
Yeah, that would be good actually.
Because there's more. Yeah, let's just do topic prep today so that everybody can start thinking about it.
Yeah, and let's take a break before we start doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, like
I'll get that PDF.
Yeah.
And then also before we start, we'll talk about just like how we're going to do the next couple, like the next week or so. Oh, Regime Jackson, how hard is it to create like a new school on Tab Room?
I have no idea. Ian's done it. I'd ask him.
Yeah. Yeah, and something I'll probably work on is trying to get like one-sheet summaries of all these presentations, and then we can share those. So yeah, I'll work on that. Does anybody, because after tomorrow, we're not going to be doing any skill or technical lectures or anything. So does anybody have anything they want us to cover?
Sid, could you give the topic presentation because you know the topic and the
Yeah,
presentation?
Yo, also that includes stuff that we've already gone over, but you're still confused about, which
Yeah.
I think, like, if there's just something we need to go over again, we will. Yeah, you don't have to like tell us right now. We can just probably like put a form or something. But yeah.
Yeah, you can like, yeah, even just DMing one of us on Discord works fine. Yeah, because the whole point of this, even like, if we don't end up like, the original plan was not to have y'all like write cases and stuff, because we want everybody to have like very good fundamentals and all going into the season. So that's the biggest thing we want to worry about, is that everybody has key understandings of all these topics.
Yeah, and if you understand these topics, you will be ahead of like most, not even just most novice debaters, most debaters. Like, yeah.
Because I will speak from the experience I think that Rajiv, Sid, and I all had, which is that we didn't have like these structured lessons like at all. It was a lot, like, especially during the school year, you're thrown in the deep end. That's pretty much it. And you sometimes ask Matusiak or Wilson for help. But beyond that, you were more or less on your own to figure it out. And they would just help you go over your rounds. So we had to learn the fundamentals along the way. Whereas if you guys are starting with good fundamentals, like your capacity for like growth will be like much higher.
I think also just being prepared as a novice helps a lot. Like I remember USC novice my freshman year. I remember Jackson, do you remember Mona and I had done a practice debate like the Thursday before, and it was like really bad.
Yeah.
But like that helps so much, because going to my first debate, I remember the other person, she was really nervous going into it because she didn't respond to my AF case at all. So like having that confidence of already knowing what's going to happen helps so much as a novice and just as a debater.
And like there are obviously going to be things that just like will have to come with experience, but like yeah, I mean we're like hopefully trying to prepare you for most of those things. Then, as you know, like we'll be on the team, some of us, and like you can ask us questions as the season rolls along.
Yeah, and also doing more like online tournaments and stuff, and doing more practice rounds. Like even if you just want to like do like a practice round like on a weekend one day, just like send in the Discord, like, and the debate won't be like, can anybody do a practice round this week? And then somebody will be able to. Because that's the best way to improve.
Yeah. Wait, we were on break, right?
Oh yeah. We'll just like.
Yeah. No, I got you. Let's say break over then, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Is everybody back?
If you're not back, say something.
Daniel, are you there?
Oh, hello, Felix.
I'm not here.
You ready for this topic lecture?
I was just popping in to say hello.
Felix, did you see your role on the server?
What?
Do you see your role on the server?
No.
It's Praj's disciple.
Oh, I see. Hi, Praj. All right. Well, this has been stunning, but my services are needed elsewhere.
Sure. Okay. Bye. All right.
So schedule for the rest of the for the rest of camp is right. We're going to go to the topic lecture right now. Tomorrow we're going to talk about case writing and research, and then Friday we're going to talk about like the whole brainstorming we're going to go through the whole brainstorming process we go through for coming up with topics. I'm coming up with contentions and ideas for arguments. So we're going to have you guys come back, and then we're going to have you guys write a contention over the weekend. And then next week, we're going to split everybody up into groups of 2. and then basically do like mentorship. So like Rajiv will have a group of 2, Jackson will have a group of 2, and I'll have a group of 2. So that when we're working on case writing, we can help all of you out a lot more specifically. And then hopefully, I think what we're going to try to do is have Monday night, have you guys write a framework, and then have you debate. Have you guys do practice debates between each other on Tuesday, and then kind of the same thing with the other side, and then we're going to have a tournament on Friday. Does that sound good to everybody? Yeah. It sounds very intimidating. I definitely sound like it's definitely very intimidating, especially if this is the first case you're writing, to write it in like 2 days.
Very scary.
Or write a framework in 1 day. But we'll talk about it a lot tomorrow, like just how to break it down into smaller pieces to understand. So yeah.
We also have an LD team drive that if anyone wants to be added to, we can add you. That has, at this point, 3 years worth of topics and cases that you can look at for inspiration.
Yes, I want.
You put your stuff on the drive.
Wait, my stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, cool, thanks. Before your account gets yeeted by Sean?
Yeah. I don't know, like, it seems to just exist indefinitely, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. Sean's just dealing with the sadness of not having us there this summer.
True.
Okay, so this is the topic we're going to be using for the CAM tournament, having you guys write your own cases, and from now on, what this is a potential topic for November, December. So it's one of 3 potential topics. I think it has a likelihood of being chosen, given that it's going to be used. I know it's going to be used at one of VBI sessions. So yeah, I don't know. And I personally like it as a topic. I think it has some good stuff behind it. And tomorrow we're also going to talk about how the topics are like chosen and stuff, how that affects how you approach it. So let me move this. Okay, so this is the top resolve. The United States ought to provide a federal jobs guarantee. You don't have to know what a federal jobs guarantee is. You don't have to, because that's part of research. And this presentation, of course. Okay, so breaking the res down. So we talked about these 3 parts. There's the actor, the obligation, and the action. Can somebody, if this is the resolution, can somebody identify who the actor is?
United States.
Yep. Can somebody identify what the obligation is?
Isn't it moral?
Yeah, it's ought.
Yeah.
So ought is commonly used as a moral obligation. So depending on who you ask, practicality may or may not be implied. You can make the argument that ought does not imply a practical.
Yeah, so it's just moral, but like you don't have,
So sometimes you'll have to make the argument around, I think it's an argument that a lot of judges will buy around. And then what's the action that's being asked of, or like asked for to do?
Federal job guarantee or whatever.
Yeah. So what is a federal jobs guarantee? So basically there's two main proposals, one kind of proposal. One is from an economist called Daniel. It's a Russian last name. I can't pronounce it. Sorry.
Yeah, I got you.
Hold on. I think I just have to move Gabby's one. Or I didn't know what's happening.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you either.
And there's one from Duke University, which is called the NEIC. But basically what this is, it's a summary of like the similarities between them. So these are jobs in like infrastructure repair, community jobs. There's things like childcare, elderly work, things like that. They get benefits. So like health insurance is given, sick leave and vacation retirement plans are given. So what's happened, and this has been instituted in Argentina and in rural areas in India. So And what the plan that Daniel, I'm going to call her Daniel T, she's the economist. Basically what she says is on the local level, the jobs will be determined, but the reason it's a federal jobs guarantee is because it ends up being funded by the federal government. So yeah. And then okay, so like history of federal jobs guarantee in the US, during the New Deal and the Great Depression, we had the WPA, which was focused on public works projects, and the CCC, which was focused on environmental conservation, and both gave money, gave jobs because we were in the Great Depression. But as we entered World War II, there was less of a need for them, so we ended up ending those programs to provide like war jobs. And of course, there's also the Argentina example and India. So the India program only has helped provide jobs to people in rural areas. And the Argentina program, I have to figure out how to get access to the abstract, and then I'll summarize that and send it out or whatever. So yeah. Okay, so the proposals right now, so this is the NIEC, this from Duke University. So anybody above 18 or older can get this. It's $23,000 per year or $11.83 per hour, health insurance, and then gives jobs. The main difference between this program and, it's Pavlina, my bad. And this plan is the wage. Pavlina's plan proposes a wage of $15 per hour plus benefits, and this is meant to be administered locally while funded federally. So that's the main difference, that the wages and otherwise they're essentially the same other than the small implementation. Any questions on those so far? Okay, I think that's all. Like, there's not that like much going on with it right now, just because like there's a lot of debate on it, but nothing really has been passed in the US so far. So yeah. Any questions?
So are we just going to debate on like why it's good, or like what are we actually debating on?
So the resolution is the United States ought to provide a federal jobs guarantee. So like the affirmative debates like why the US has a moral obligation to provide it, and the negative has a debate debates why the US has a moral obligation to not provide.
Could one of the possible impacts be racism? Because maybe like certain people will be able to get the federal job versus other people who can't.
So that's actually one of the half cases I wrote. And we're going to have a demo debate on Monday on this topic between Jackson and I. So you guys will be able to see that. And yeah. Okay. So I think that's all for today. Does anybody have any questions? If you want to, you can start doing some research on it tonight. You don't really need to. Actually, no, don't do research because I'm going to make a quiz on the responses. And I'll send that out.
Does the second proposal also include insurance?
Yeah. So it's basically like, yeah.
Exactly the same, except the hourly wage is a little bit different.
And the second plan talks about being administered mainly on the local level.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
But still funded federally, so it's considered a federal jobs guarantee.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I wouldn't worry about the minutia of the differences because you're not going to be debating them. Just be like, everyone gets a job from the federal government and it's a good job. The end.
Yeah, it's just like this stuff is good to know. It's like, you know how we talk about cross-sects, you can like flex your knowledge. This is where you can use that stuff. You can be like, well, if they were like, how much does this actually provide? You could be like, well, there's actually two plans happening right now. One is from Duke University and one is provided by a economist, Pavlina Chernava, I think that's her name, I don't know. And you can be like, one provides mainly $11.83 per hour, while one provides $15 per hour. You can talk about that. Also, I'm pretty sure that NIEC, the reason it has the $23,000 per year is because that's the poverty line for a family of 4. So that's where that number comes from. So yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Okay. Everybody take care. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Yep.
See you guys.
All right. Bye.